Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to share with you how I made this dress. Now this is based off of a Chinese Qi Pao. So it's just basically the idea of it, not a traditional one, because one, those are not super easy to make, and two, because I'm just making this for a little baby and she's not going to want to fuss with all those buttons. So let's go ahead and get started. So here you're just starting with your basic pattern. You can decide if you would prefer it more empire style or at the waist style. It really just depends on the age. The younger they are, you want to do more empire, and as they get older, then the upper part can go to their waist. So my daughter is only like 20 months, so I'm going a little bit more baby style. So I've got all my pattern pieces cut out. Now this front one, I went and cut the two separate pieces of fabric. You don't technically have to do this. You could do a single fold bias tape and then just sew down along both sides. Now I decided not to do that just because I wanted more of the feel that it was separate, that it was being connected by the Chinese knot. Also by doing it this way, I only needed to have one line of sewing rather than two. So this is just the route I went. If you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, do a single fold bias tape rather than double. Now you do want to make sure it is bias tape. I recommend making your own so it's the correct color. But you want that bias tape so you can make those curves. I'll also be using bias tape for the collar, which will be red, and then the skirt will be red as well. For the top part, I am using lining fabric just because it makes some of the edges come out a little bit nicer that I'll show you a little bit later. And also because this is a fairly thin apparel fabric, so you can see through the light pink. So I will be using lining just on the upper body. Now to get started, I'm going to need to connect everything in the front. So I went ahead and attached that bias tape, made sure it was attached really nicely, and then I am hand sewing on this Chinese knot. Now that everything in the front is ready to go, I'm going to clip off the edges, and then we can follow this just like any traditional baby dress pattern. So make sure you're doing right sides together, and we'll be sewing the shoulder seams first. If you'd like, you could also press out the seams where you know that you're going to be inserting a zipper. Now I am not going to show you how to insert the zipper because it's my first time doing the invisible zipper, and it's not going to be perfect, so I don't recommend following me on my first try. But this is nice. This exact same pattern you can use to do buttons instead, or a different type of closure. You do not have to use a zipper. So now that I've done my shoulders for both the lining and the main pattern, make sure that the right sides are together. On the white, you can see I've marked blue X's to remind me what is the wrong side, because it's really hard to tell with a solid color fabric. Now typically, if you are not doing a zipper, you can do the armholes, the collar, and the back, and just leave the sides and the bottom open, and you'll be able to pull in all of your seams. Now because I'm inserting the zipper, and the zipper is not fully releasing, so it stops at the end, it's not like a jacket zipper, I cannot do that. I tried, I failed, I had to undo it, so definitely don't follow that. But I wanted nice seams on my shoulders, or on my armholes. So I am going to sew the armholes and then flip it inside out. Okay, I decided to go ahead and just practice the zipper, so it took me a couple tries, but I got it, and at least I know how that works now. But of course, like I mentioned, because it doesn't open all the way, I cannot do the seams like that with the lining, or it's going to cause a lot of problems. Now, if you had decided to use bias tape for the armholes instead, then I would recommend doing this back and the collar area at the same time and then flipping it, because then you can hide the raw edges in the armholes with the bias tape. Now, there's so many different ways you can do it. It just kind of depends on how you get started. And since I'm not a professional, I'm just kind of figuring it out. Alright, here I have the main zipper installed, and then of course you can see where I did the arms and have flipped it right side out again. This way I just love it. It creates such a nice little seam on the arms. And personally, in my opinion, I have a hard time doing bias tape on armholes. I just never think the finish looks as nice, so I definitely prefer to do it this way. Now, I did not go ahead and insert the collar. One, because I'm just not ready to do that, and I decided I'm just going to do it more traditionally, where I'm hiding the seams rather than folding it in the best way to hide all the seams. Anyways, you'll just kind of see, and I'm sure if you've seen some of my other baby videos, you've seen how I've done the other collars and things like that. So one thing that I love about sewing is that you are just learning a lot with every sewing project. So because I wasn't sure how to do the lining, and because I really wanted the armholes to be how I did them, I will be attaching the lining myself, and I'll be using a blind stitch and just doing a hand stitch across. So definitely a little bit of painstaking time, but you live and learn. Alright, now it's time for the collar. So I did get the fusible interfacing just because the fabric is very light and I did want it to stick up more like a proper collar. So I'll just be ironing that on, and then I'll just be sewing the base and kind of the curved tip. So just along the bottom, I'm not trying to make a tube or anything with it because the raw edges I will be sewing along the side. So you'll see as I continue. Okay, so here you can see that I've already sewn them in. I've already done the wrong sides together so you don't see the interfacing. And I've pinned it all along the back just so I know where it's going to be. And of course, I don't want any odd pulling. I'd rather it pull to the back and have extra rather than it misaligning my middle. So I am going to start from the middle first and then go out and then turn around and do that side. Make sure that your right sides are together. And actually, this is kind of a cute way to keep the collar too, but make sure your right sides are together, and then all you have to do once you're done sewing is just flip it up. And of course, to be able to hold that posture, you're just going to want to top stitch it down. Now, I'm going to do a stitch in the ditch and see if that'll hold it down well enough, but if not, you can just stitch just a tiny bit underneath the red collar all the way around and it will hold. It's getting really dark and late, and so it's hard to tell, but I did do the stitch in the ditch all the way around with a red thread, and it worked perfectly on holding it down. I'll probably go back later and use my serger just to make those raw edges a little bit neater around the collar. Alright, now it is morning time and it is time to finish this bodice. So make sure you open it up and hold the lining together, and then grab the main patterns, making sure everything is right sides together, and then you're just going to sew it across. I try to only do maybe like a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do more. I just like to work closer to my edges, and then when you flip it around, all the raw edges are on the inside. Now measure your bodice so you can figure out your skirt length. Now, of course, you could do pleats, like a fork pleat that I learned, and that would be super cute. I decided just to go with a basic gathering skirt, which I did 1.5 times the length. So my bodice was 10.5, so 21 total. So I ended up doing about 32 inches of fabric, and if I had to do it again, I would make it even bigger. I would want a lot more poof, so I recommend doing at least twice as much. Kind of depends on how big the skirt is, how long it is, to see how much you're really going to get that gathering. So a gathering stitch is pretty simple. You just do your longest stitch, don't back stitch at all, and then you're able just to pull the bottom and then gather it. So see right here where it's super gathered, it's super cute, but that when I started stretching it out, I didn't have quite as many gathers, but that's okay. The dress still turned out adorable. Alright, make sure right sides are always together. I'm leaving a little bit of seam allowance so I can attach it to the rest of the zipper there and kind of figure that out. So here I'm just making sure all the right sides. Again, I've marked a little bit with chalk so I know that that's the wrong side. And then I'm just going to sew it all the way around. Then when you pull it right side up, you're practically done. You just need to do a couple of finishing touches. So it did take me a little bit of time, but I did figure out how to attach the rest of the zipper and then close the seam all the way down. Now, I'm not sure what happened to my video clip, but if you turn this inside out, you'll notice that the lining is not attached yet. So you can fold in the raw edges and cover up the edges where the skirt meet, and then you can do a stitch in the ditch all the way around, and you'll have a clean edge that doesn't bother your little one. Happy Chinese New Year, everyone.